Nadine, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, it's really great to get you on the show. Before we begin, let's share with my listeners a little bit about your background as a professional speaker, as a poet, as an author, and all of the things that you do to share and inspire to the universe.
Absolutely. It is something that I stumbled upon. I never set out to be anyone's speaker or poet or author. I was minding my own business and I stumbled upon it. I stumbled upon it when life threw me some curveballs. So writing became therapy, right? So a lot of people can attest to that. I would scribble my thoughts, my fears, my feelings, but I was very much the introvert. So everything I wrote, pretty much, I would share it. I had all sorts of folks in my inner circle that would listen to my ramblings on. And they kept saying, one thing that kept reverberating throughout the years is, Nadine, you're so talented. You got to do something with that. And so I had a whole bunch of scribblings all over. I never even really took that to heart. I was just doing I was doing my career, my family, I was going about life. And then one day I had to shift careers. I had to slow everything all the way down because of some things that were happening in my personal life. And I found myself as well with some extra money from an entrepreneurial endeavor that I embarked upon. And there was an article. I met a gentleman at a trade show. I was in the construction industry. That's how I started in entrepreneurship. And I met a gentleman at a trade show and, got to talking, the extrovert that I am. It turned out he's a publisher for a magazine.
Okay.
And White Sands magazine at the time. I don't think it's still in service, but he asked me to write an article. It was titled Building Castles in the Sand, and it was geared to those folks who can afford a home down in the tropics. And so I spoke to that. And when the article came out that year on 2 pages, I was completely blown away. And then the feedback from it, he kept saying, oh, you got to write a book. And now, mind you, I'd been hearing that throughout the years, right, from other folks that would read my writing. So I'm like, well, how do you go about that? And he gave me some guidance, and I was off to the races. I self-published The Culmination of Marriage Between Me and My Pen. So the idea is that we were building this relationship over the years, and the book was the culmination of the marriage. It was a marriage, right? And that's where it all started. And that was 2008. And I've not looked back since.
That's I love that. The marriage between you and your pen, and the book was the baby.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So I want to go back to that article. The first thing that you had published was a nonfiction piece. Yes. That was sort of solicited. So an editor said, hey, I'd love for you to write that. Right. And that was the spark of, instead of just sharing your work with others that you knew in your circles, this was sharing it to a much broader audience.
Most definitely.
And that kind of was the clincher towards that?
That was definitely the catalyst, for sure.
Wow. Can you talk a little bit about the marriage to the pen? What does that mean?
At the time, I had no idea, except I was thinking it was that I had all these scribblings, and then putting them together in the book was a culmination of that work. And then marrying the pen, that commitment to writing. But looking back, I think it might have a little bit to do as well with the demise of a marriage that I was coming out of. So I think, like looking back in reflection, and this is just in recent years, I look back and I say, maybe that had a little bit to do with it, because those first books I wrote was a whole lot of therapy, let me tell you. But I gained a whole lot of fans as well, because so many people could identify with the things I was writing about. I had no filter. I laid it all out there, and I really wish I could go back and capture a little bit. I've grown some layers of filters, let me tell you, but sometimes I really wish courage would pay me a visit so I could visit my old self, where I was so open.
Wow. Well, I think people appreciate that when they realize that you're bleeding through your pen, right? You're just You're sharing it right onto the page.
Absolutely. Tears to ink is what I call it.
Oh, I love that. Tears to ink. That's really great. So very memoir-esque then? Is that, would you say?
Very much.
Okay. And how?
But in a poetic form.
And then so for the lessons that you're sharing of the things you learned, obviously the triumphs, the tragedies, the mistakes, the great things that happened. How did that translate into speaking, or were you speaking prior to that?
I was not speaking prior to that. I mean, unless you count getting up in church and singing or testifying, because I grew up
Okay.
very much in church. I would say, no, actually, in my professional life as well, the speaking had started in my professional life. I was supervisor in 2 different travel insurance firms. And having that leadership role, I had quite the opportunity to speak. And I found as well that I kept getting a lot of positives about my speaking abilities. But I would take it all the way back to childhood, really. Growing up in
Really?
Jamaica, I did a lot of reading as a child. We grew up very much in the country, very picturesque. You know, we'd frolic in the gullies in the daytime, but come 6, 7 o'clock, because we had no electricity there in the country, unless we wanted to go to bed, we would pop out a book. And so I was a designated reader. So I felt like from my eyes were at my knees, I had an audience. My family would gather around to hear me read. And so that is truly where it all, if I'm to really take it back, that's where it started.
Wow, I love the oral storytelling tradition. So the family, maybe friends, neighbors, close
Yes,
people that close to you would sit around, and you would be reading stories.
absolutely.
I've got to ask, are there some that still stick with you that you just
Yes.
remember the great
The
experience?
Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys stories, though, let me tell you,
Oh yeah.
those mystery stories really, really, in fact, I have a couple of the books still.
Oh wow. Wow, that
And
is
then my
amazing.
grandfather as well. My grandfather, so I grew up with grandparents. My mom was the first to leave the island, first of 12 siblings. And so that also made me this kind of special child, my brother and I, in that, you know, all hands were on deck because my mom wasn't there. She didn't have traveling privileges to come and go. So she left me as a baby, and then I met her again at 15. So there was this protective layer from the remaining family group that was there. And, you know, they truly molded him. So my grandmother was kind of like the breadwinner in that she would leave the country and travel into the city. She was more the extrovert. My
Right.
grandfather was more the farmer, and he would take care of the grandbabies kind of thing. And so I remember quite a number of times sitting at his feet on the veranda, and he would tell these stories of his days working on a sugarcane plantation in, it's called the Gray's Inn sugarcane plantation in Jamaica and St. Mary at the time. And those sort of stories. And I think that's what sort of gave me that historical, because I do a lot of work around Black history. I think that is truly where that Black history bit was born, out of the stories my grandfather would tell.
Oh wow, that I love that. That's just such a and
Very
it's funny how it all connects, right?
Yes,
You are now a storyteller, both with prose, poetry, and obviously oral,
yes.
for the audiences that you motivate. Now you've spoken at quite a few different significant events. Can you share a few of those, and kind of
Oh,
maybe how that came to pass?
oh, absolutely. The most significant, I would say, is opening for Mrs. Obama. She came here in 2017. I know,
Wow.
like I know, and that's
I'm
something
so jealous.
I stumbled upon that gig in such a magnificent way. So I had been, like I said, the extrovert in me. I don't write, although I'm writing for myself. I
Right.
feel like if I love the work, you know, what others add to it is icing. So I share it a lot. And so in the sharing and networking and being so open, I grew very quickly quite the following on Facebook, is where it was at the time. And a couple of politicians took a liking to me. And so I got invitations quite a bit. Actually, I think over a 10-year period, I was invited to Queen's Park maybe about 7 different times. And that's 7
Wow.
different years for things like Black History Month, Emancipation Day celebrations, that sort of thing. And so I started to grow sort of influential people within my circle, let's say. And then I was invited to an event. I want to say it was the early part of 2017, an event down by the Toronto Stock Exchange, where I met an amazing woman that runs an organization out of Toronto. And just, you know, I don't go to events and sit in a corner. I share, I talk, I network. I say, hey, I'm Nadine Williams. How you doing? You know, um, and uh, and From that conversation is how the Michelle Obama gig came about, because introduced myself, told her who I was and everything, and then I followed up. I'm not very good at following up, let me tell you. I've gotten quite a number of amazing cards and have done nothing with it, but I did follow up, and she said, I have just the gig for you, and she says, Michelle Obama is coming to Toronto. How would you like to? I'm like, why you lied to me? I thought we were friends. Like, oh, well, I was so blown away, and turned out she wasn't lying. It was real. And I had that amazing opportunity. I think there was over 3,000 people in the audience. And then we had the photo up at the back. I remember passing her in the hallway. And let me tell you, she called me beautiful. Mm-hmm. Oh my God. When I went to take a picture with her, she says, "Oh yes, beautiful Nadine." It's something that something that stays with me for sure.
And I look back and I remember trying to get tickets and just there was nothing, right? There's no way to get
it. Was
and you've been invited to participate in.
Very much so. I was the opening act. Sorry.
When you were there for the Michelle Obama event,
right.
What did you do?
So I read a poem called "Us Women."
Okay.
That poem actually was my Black History Month poem, originally called "Us Africans." And so I tweaked it. This was it might have been around 2009. That was around my 2009, 2010 Black History Month poem. But, International Women's Day follows Black History Month. Yeah. And so, as you know, poetry is one of these things that celebrates different events, right? So whether it's International Women's Day, whether it's Emancipation Day, whether it's Black History Month, that sort of thing, Father's Day, Mother's Day, you get the idea. So International Women's Day, I just sort of tweaked Us Africans and called it Us Women. And then I tweaked it even further, a line down in there where it says, us women are poets, pharmacists, podiatrists. I say us women are a phenomenal wife to the people's president. And it was already memorized, so it was a very easy thing. There was a glitch at that event, however, because there were two poems that I was to perform. Because at that event, each adult was matched with a youth. Okay. So for organizations purchasing, 10 tickets, let's say, they'd have to purchase 10 youth tickets. So I had written something specifically for the youth, and it was fun because one of the things I love is humor. I don't know if you've detected that already. Oh, yeah. But I always like to bring laughter to everything. So whereas Us Women is strong, resilient, lovable, and capable of awesome exploits is a more serious piece. The piece I wrote for the young people was fun, if time would permit, I would write the longest poem I ever wrote, just so I could capture and emote this moment right here. And then it goes on and say, but we can't sleep in this dream. We must work in this dream, blood, sweat, and tears in this dream. All this fun I had for them, right? But what happened is I didn't make, this is a lesson I learned. So I was supposed to arrive very, very early. And at the last minute, I got tickets. I have three young people, three young adults, my kids. Well, they're not kids anymore. And so I secured tickets for them last minute. So rounding them up to bring them along, because, it's important. It's more for the young people than it is really for us. So I wanted them to have that experience, but it caused me to be late for my call time. Oh. But hello, I'm thinking, I don't have music accompaniment. All I need is a mic that works. And then I go up there and do my thing, right? I was so wrong, let me tell you, because the sound people had no idea that I was doing two. The organizer invited me to do two, so she knew. But the sound people didn't know. So when I pivoted from Us Women, because, you finish that one, you don't just jump right into, you pivot to then start. He switched the mic over to the announcer, ladies and gentlemen, Nadine Williams. So I froze. I was like in a moment of like, I could kick myself because Us Women in of itself, as amazing as it was the secondary one that would have really made it memorable. And so I learned from that you always show up for call time. 10 minutes. Okay. Hello, for Mrs. Obama, you go there 1 hour before call time, let me tell you.
Yeah. So I picked up on something when you were relaying like that second poem. Right. And I wonder if that goes back to singing in maybe in a church group or something like that, because you weren't just reading, you were performing, right?
Yes, very much. When I get on stage, I'm a very different person, I have to tell you.
Yeah.
It come very much performance mode. And oftentimes I do interject singing. And oftentimes I turn quite a number of my poems into songs and include it in my performance.
So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm curious about you've got the poetry on a page that someone may read in a journal or read somewhere. And then what I always love about poetry is I love seeing the poet themselves or even someone else interpreting their poem and
Right.
actually performing it, because that brings, for me, it seems to bring a whole new life. So I'm curious about when you're writing it. um, I don't know if you write by hand or on a typewriter, but I'm just wondering do you actually maybe speak and perform it, at least in your head, as the words are going on the page?
Oh, absolutely. Even last night, I wrote a piece last night and I ended up recording it and uploading it. I do, like, it's not just about I have to sound it out, whether it's in my
Okay.
head or out loud, for it to really get the rhythm and the rhyme and the rise and fall that I need it. So absolutely, you often find me doing that. And I love to scribble. I mean, even though, I have I have all sorts of electronic devices, I still find myself scribbling not to lose my handwriting as well, because I don't know about you, but because we scarcely write, at times it feels so odd to be writing. So I try to I try to do that. It could be a word I scribble. I remember an amazing poem that that a lot of people gravitated towards. It's a word that came to me, trepidation, and I wrote down the word trepidation, and from trepidation I wrote an amazing poem. I
Oh,
subscribe to Merriam-Webster Word of the Day, and so my vocabulary is ever building, and I think I did that somewhere in 92.
oh, wow. I love that
Yeah,
an entire ecosystem of words can come out of that one.
absolutely.
That's amazing. I have to ask. It's funny you mentioned that. I was thinking about my 16-year-old son, and he does not know how to read cursive because that was not taught to him in school. And so
Mm.
his like when he sees like my handwriting, like or whatever, and he's like, "What's that?" Because they never learned that the way we learned. And maybe your children the same, or did they learn?
Absolutely. These people, your child and my children, they're what we call digital natives. So
Yes.
us digital immigrants, we are accustomed more to the written to writing, where they live on their devices and do quite a bit. But I'm sure in school that's still something that's taught, but kids are more accustomed to the electronics.
Right. So I know if I want to write something in code that like he's not going to be able to read, I just have to, used to have to rely on a pharmacist to decipher the doctor's prescription. Right. But even my doctor now, it's a printout that she just sends right to
Absolutely.
the right to the pharmacy directly,
Yes.
digital.
In due
So
time.
I'm curious then about the difference between your memoir essays, longer prose as opposed to poetry. Is there a rhythm? Is there a beat? Is there a performance in that too, or is that a
Every
different
last piece
writing?
of them, every last piece of writing that I do, it's got that performance bit written in. When I came here from Jamaica and went started high school at Western Collegiate, I was very tall and skinny, and so a lot of the coaches gravitated towards me, putting me on their teams until they quickly realized that I was not sporty at all. But what I was I was artistic. So drama and music, I was immersed in that quite a bit in my early high school years.
So drama, were you doing performing for
Plays,
theater?
Godspell. I remember being in Godspell. I remember being in the school choir. Definitely performance, yes.
Wow. So you talked about your previous career in construction, and
Yes.
then writing books,
Mhm.
poetry, and then speaking. How did the speaking how did that evolve over the years?
Okay, so the speaking actually evolved. It started really my family, I'm a divorced single mom, and so my children had gone through therapy, a therapy group sessions in the region of Peel here where I live, and then they had a celebratory event at the end. And so the therapist knew me to be a writer because I
Right.
I share everything, and she invited me to read at the finale of that session for all the families gathered. And I remember it was the Loblaws, the upstairs of a Loblaws in Mississauga, where families had gathered, and that was my first stage, and
Right.
I had crying women hugging me at the end, and so it really it made me realize I was onto I knew I was onto something, because I myself knew it was good. People throughout the years kept telling me it was good, and then here we are now, these women crying and identifying with the story, with the piece that I had read, and also the children's school, the librarian at Mountain Ash Public School, where the kids were going at the time. I would go there, and because I had, with the changes that I'd had that had come about with the construction work that gave me flexibility to control my own time, I could afford to go into this kids' school. And then the librarians started sharing between each other, and this is how I started reading in schools.
Wow.
And before you know it, it was boards, and I also stumbled upon creating Black History Month posters that year as well.
Cool. I love that. And there's sort of two things I kind of want to ask about. The second one will be about how things changed from in-person events to pandemic times where they're virtual. I want to
Right.
get to that because that's always something creative folks, especially when you do in-person things, deal with. But I'm also curious about, and I think when we were chatting earlier, and you mentioned it in your poetry, the way you adapted a poem from Black History Month into women's, right? Because the natural progression from February to March.
Yes.
Is that a thing that you obviously must have to do that for schools or for different groups, and you readapt a lesson to be more applicable? Is that an important thing as a speaker?
Almost absolutely. So it's always thematic. You have to take into consideration what is the theme, whether it's the theme of the event, the theme of the month. Oftentimes the theme is thrown back on me to create. But I often ask the client, do you have a theme for this event? If I don't already have something in the repertoire, then I create something. And that's very important to be mindful of the theme. I can't come in reading about something that's so irrelevant. So you have to be in tune with what the theme is, and then keep to that theme. I might run 2, 3 jokes off of the theme, but I always come back to it.
Okay, cool. So how has that then, as I alluded to, how has that changed, since I guess last year this time when things started to lock down and
Mhm.
change being able to go any place in person? How's that changed for you?
I have to tell you, it was very depressing. I went through different stages of like can't get out of bed, because I had some amazing plans. I had some travel related plans. I was in the middle of an art installation project that had just launched in February. One of them sits now at Union Station in celebration of the International Decade for People of African Descent. Union Station, the city of Vaughan. I just come back from Edmonton. The Edmonton School Board had gotten involved in that. And so I had international travel aspirations with respect to that. And so it really just kind of leveled me on my face for a minute. But what really got me through it is like, you're not special, you're not alone, the whole world is going through this. So this is what I kept telling myself, and that really kind of pulled me out of myself. And then being a creative, the brain's forever going, okay, what next? How can I turn this around? How can I pivot? That's a word that people are using a lot. How can I turn this around and keep it going? Because hello, you've come too far to turn back now, to fold up the towel. You have to keep going. Your
Right.
kids have sacrificed too much. They're looking to you for this success story. You can't stop now. Not just my kids, but my fans, their students that recognizes me in the streets, people, so I just know that I have to keep going. So I stayed in bed for a while, and I still do, even now, every now and then I still feel a little blue, I'm not gonna lie, but I always manage to pick myself up and keep going. And I've picked up exercising. I was getting really fat, let me tell you. Maybe fat's not the proper word. I was gaining quite a bit of pounds because we were cooking.
Pandemic pounds, we call them.
Definitely, it was cooking and baking a lot, and
Yeah.
wasn't active. But I've started. I'm telling you, the jeans I'm wearing today couldn't zip up a few months ago, and so I've started walking and watching the simple things like the Canada geese out there and all of that, and it's just giving me life.
Right. Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, it's funny when you talk about, as a writer, I find going on a walk very inspiring because I'll try to go for a walk and attend to what's around me, whether it's a nature path, whether it's just a neighborhood that I haven't
Yeah,
walked through before. And then I usually find something in there to write about.
absolutely.
Do you have
And
the same
you're
experience?
getting the physical in as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
It's
Whether
exercising the mind in many ways too.
exercising the mind, for sure, because in walking, you start to think, okay, sometimes I'm in the moment, but I think about things to come, like what do I have to do tomorrow, and what are some thoughts. So some thoughts that come to mind in terms of what I can interject in that, and I take out my phone and I tap the word or the thought into my notes and I keep going. So um it's been an amazing journey, let me tell you.
Wow, wow. So how do you, because you do so many different creative things, how do you define yourself? Do you call yourself a writer, a poet? Just be like, what's the sort of, do you have a catchphrase that you use?
So I'm Nadine Williams, a poet, author, and arts educator. That's what I
Arts
call
educator.
myself.
Okay. All right. Cool. Now,
Yeah.
you talked about the importance. You said we're there for the youth. It's for them.
Yes.
So I would love for young people, whether they're young at spirit or young in terms of getting into writing and theatrics and creativity and all of those things. What sort of advice would you want to bestow upon that sort of that next generation of creatives?
I would say if it is writing, just start. People will say, I want to publish a book. Just start writing, and sort of go with the natural flow of where that takes you. If you don't start, you never know where you can go, right? So you definitely need to start. And of course, if it's not writing, if it's photography, I mean, even when I go out there walking, I'm taking pictures of the sunset. So I do photography. So whatever the art form, certainly find that creative. The creative expression, be sure and share it, because the feedback that you get will also help you to know that you're on the right path. Like I mentioned for myself, all of those people telling me, "Oh my God, Nadine, you're so talented. You got to keep going." It settled in the back of my mind, and then at the opportune moment, it came to the fore. So share if you're doing it to. It's good to get it out, but it's also good to share it with others.
Great. Oh my God. Thank you so much. That is awesome. So please let my listeners know where they can find out more about you and all the cool things you're up to.
Awesome. So NadineWilliams.ca is my website, and it's not been updated since I put it up, I have to admit. But also, just, when you put me in Google, you'll find quite a bit about me as well. Something I'm extremely proud of this year is that same art installation project I mentioned. It was in commemoration of the International Decade for People of African Descent. And I'd stumbled upon the Historic Sites and Monuments Board of Canada in that research and nominated a few historical significant events in Canada, and the federal government designated the enslavement of Africans in Canada is now a significant historical event.
And that
Thanks to
was
the
your
nomination.
nomination.
Yes, and so is the West Indian domestic scheme, where West Indian women had come up in the 60s to work as domestics, and there were some human rights violations around that immigration policy at the time.
Well, can we talk about that a little bit? Because I think
Yes.
as we're in Canada and we like to believe that we're a little bit better than our neighbors to the south who have all these
Mhm.
issues, but we don't have those issues, right? We're innocent. That's
Absolutely.
not really the case, is it?
No, not at all. And I mean, I heard our premier mention that in an interview. It feels like about a few months ago. He made that differentiation, but that's absolutely not true. It might not be as overt and in our faces like we've seen it. Actually, I don't think the U.S. is, especially over the last little bit, they're kind of in a category of their own. Let me
Yeah,
tell you.
of course.
But we definitely have issues that definitely need work. There's a lot of work still to be done right here. And oftentimes people are unaware of their biases. I have an upcoming keynote that I have to do for the construction industry. And, especially in an industry like that, where there are a lot of older heads that's right. Older European heads, I would say.
Right.
Sometimes there's some jokes that people make. Something as simple as, he's on Caribbean time, or he's on Jamaican time. We've heard things like that where people cackle and laugh, but that's not funny at all. So little things like these, and then there are more in your face things like the nooses that were found at different sites and all of that, right? So there's
Right.
a lot of people that's complaining. especially during the pandemic, people are getting out of the city and going to the suburbs, and there are issues being now found in terms of tolerance and being welcomed and feeling welcome. Someone reached out to me to help with some advocacy work out in the Stratford region. They have some issues around forming an not even anti-Black, but anti-racism task force. They met with some dreadful opposition at city council meetings
Really?
and all of that.
And you
Yeah,
think of Stratford as you think of it as a very liberal, very open, very, because you've got the theater and all of that art community, because typically the art community and people who read tend to be more empathetic,
so
typically.
not the city itself, the region. I'm
What's
trying to
the
remember.
outline?
I think
The
it's
outline,
Perth.
like the,
I want to say it's Perth County, but can't be
okay.
very. So it's the county on a whole. So perhaps not that particular city. So let's say, for example, we would look at Peel region and we would say, Brampton's a lot more multicultural than you
Right.
would say Caledon, right? And
Oh, of
so,
course, yeah.
and so there's that differentiation. It's also the surrounding communities as well. There were some issues, and the gentleman called me almost in tears, was asking me to help, to come down and help him. But I'm saying I can't come down. We're in a pandemic. We have to stay home. But
Right.
I'll see what I can do otherwise. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And definitely, although we see very polarizing the events out of the States, we definitely shouldn't look and say, oh, it's over there, it's them. It's also us.
Is there? I mean, I'm obviously I have a privilege out the wazoo. I'm a middle-aged, 6'3" tall white male. I've got
A
all of it,
handsome,
all the privilege.
hello, a handsome one too, can I tell you?
You're making me blush. But I mean, what are some things that someone like myself can do to help, to learn, or to share? Are there things that you would recommend?
Oh, most definitely. My theme this year for Black History Month is nurturing hope through allyship.
Okay.
So you are an ally, and an ally is not something you are today and you're not tomorrow. It's not something you take up just because it's Black History Month. I'm going to do this tokenism sort of. It's something you take on as a life's work. It took us 400 years to get here, and we're not gonna get there tomorrow. It's going to take a lot of heavy lifting, and we need all hands on deck. So it is a matter of educating yourself. It's a matter of, in a lot of these suburban areas or country towns, you don't find a lot of people, African people of African ancestry. And so things like Black History Month in schools, I found a lot that work falls on the lone Black teacher or teachers in the
Right.
school. And so, taking it up as a white person in your organization to say, hey, it's February, it's Black History Month, or it's Emancipation Day, let us celebrate. So something that has nothing, I wouldn't say it has nothing to do with you, because believe it or not, it is all our history.
Yeah.
It has everything to do with all of us. So being an ally in the very true sense of the word. And I have met some amazing allies, especially for this Black History Month. I must tell you, because I got very late on my start. I was immersed, like I said, in my project for the art installation project, and I was going through my woe is me times, right? So I lost quite a bit of time in terms of maximizing my calendar. And when I woke up one January morning and sort of did this to myself, come on, Nadine, wake up, and started to make some calls and emails, I found some allies, and now my calendar is bursting at the seams. So, and this is all due to the work of some allies that's helped me along the way.
Wow. And I think one of the things that I got from what you said, which I think is really, really important, is recognizing that this is not a quick fix. This is not something we're
Absolutely
going
not.
to be, this is something we have to be committed and engaged in for the long haul, right?
Absolutely.
To make,
Long after the hashtags and the trendings, long after that,
right,
right? It's something that you have to take on yourself, right?
right,
And looking at the history, immerse yourself in the history. And there's so much resources available now, right? We can't really use ignorance anymore as an excuse. There's so many people. There's the
right.
Ontario Black History Society. They put out so much information, about our history here, especially in Ontario.
Awesome. I'm hoping you can send me some links that I can include in my show notes on the
Most
website so
definitely.
people can check those out. Nadine, thank you so much for spending the time with me today.
Thank you. Thank you a lot. I truly enjoyed it. Thank you.